Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
It was snowing in that perfect, almost fake-looking way that makes people believe holidays still mean something, like the world is dusting itself off just in time for forced smiles and too sweet cider. I pulled into my father's long driveway, already crowded with sleek SUVs and Chloe's white Lexus, which looked like it belonged in some Hallmark movie about rich sisters and forgiving fathers. My son, Danny, sat next to me, his earbuds in, hood up, doing that thing teenagers do when they'd rather be anywhere else. I couldn't blame him. Try to be polite, okay? I said, my voice low. You know how Grandpa gets when I breathe too loud? Danny finished, smirking without looking at me. I gave a weak laugh because what else was I supposed to do? He wasn't wrong. We walked through the front door into that too-warm house that smelled like cinnamon potpourri and old anger. The same fireplace crackled. The same giant family portrait hung over the mantel, the one taken 10 years ago, before Mom died, before everything got messy and lopsided and painfully obvious. Dad greeted us with a hug that felt like a handshake, cold and formal. You're early, he said, though we were right on time. That was his thing. Make you feel like an inconvenience just by existing. The dining table was already set, all gold-rimmed plates and matching napkin rings, like some magazine spread. Chloe wasn't there yet. Of course. She never was. She was the kind of late that people call fashionable when they're pretty and used to being the center of everything. I helped with the plates, the eggs, the mimosas. No one asked me to, they never did, but someone had to. I was always the one making things smooth, even when the floor underneath was cracked all to hell. Danny disappeared upstairs, probably texting his girlfriend or avoiding Dad's monologue about stocks or golf or whatever retired men talk about when they think their opinions matter. I wiped my hands on a dish towel when I heard the front door swing open, followed by high-pitched laughter and the sound of high heels clicking across marble. There she is, Dad said, all proud and glowing like she'd just walked in from winning a Nobel Prize. Chloe breezed in wearing a cream-colored coat with faux fur and a dress that screamed, I want people to look. She brought her fiancé, Josh, some bland-looking guy with expensive hair and perfect teeth who shook Dad's hand like he'd practiced it in a mirror. Brunch was loud. Brunch was fake. Brunch was champagne and too much perfume and Chloe telling some story about how she saw a dress in Milan, not bought it, just saw it, but still managed to make it sound like a religious experience. I drank coffee. I smiled when required. I watched Danny push scrambled eggs around his plate like he was counting down minutes until he could leave. Then came the toast. I should have seen it coming, the way Dad cleared his throat and tapped his glass, the way Chloe giggled and said, Oh my God, Dad, don't make me cry before we eat. He stood, holding a champagne flute, eyes twinkling in that rehearsed way of his. This year has been full of surprises, but none more joyful than hearing my baby girls getting married to such a fine young man. He nodded toward Josh, who nodded back like a dog looking for a treat. I know how important it is to have the perfect start to a new life together, so he reached into his jacket and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. Consider this a little help from your old man. Chloe opened it, gasped, then slapped her hand over her mouth like she'd just witnessed a miracle. Dad, you didn't, she shrieked, even though she absolutely knew he would. $40,000? She said, holding up the check like it was an Oscar. Everyone clapped. Josh kissed her cheek. Dad looked smug. Even my Aunt Linda dabbed her eyes with a cloth napkin like she'd just watched the end of a war movie. I sat there, still holding my coffee, stone still. Danny looked at me, confused. He leaned over and whispered, Didn't Grandpa say he couldn't help with my surgery? His voice cracked on the word surgery, and I wanted to grab the table and flip the whole damn thing over. Instead, I smiled. Not a real one, the kind that stretches your face just enough to stop the shaking. I waited. I waited until the plates were cleared, the second round of mimosas poured. The post-toast laughter died down into soft background noise. Then I stood up. I have something for you too, Dad, I said, and I could feel every eye swing in my direction, confused. I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain white envelope. No bow, no glitter, just paper, just truth. I handed it to him. He looked surprised but took it. Opened it slow. Inside, one single sentence written in black ink. He read it, blinked, read it again. Then nothing. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at me like I'd pulled a knife out of my purse instead of words. The room got quiet. Nobody asked what it said. I took Danny's hand. We're gonna head out, I said. Thanks for brunch. No one stopped me. Not even Chloe, who was too busy clutching her check like it might fly away. Josh tried to smile at me, some awkward twitch of his face that never made it to his eyes. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. Dad was still holding the note. Still silent. And that silence? That was louder than any scream I could have let loose. There's something about families that no holiday dinner or matching Christmas pajamas can cover up for long. The hierarchy, the quiet favoritism, the unspoken rule of who matters more and who's just there to clap from the sidelines. From the very beginning, Chloe was the crown jewel in my dad's kingdom, the one who got extra scoops of ice cream, new clothes every fall, and praise for things that would have earned me a lecture or worse. I was born first, but she arrived shiny, soft-voiced, and big-eyed, and that was enough. It's funny how people talk about firstborn responsibility like it's a privilege, when in my house, it meant stepping out of the spotlight the second she learned how to cry in a way that made grown men feel like monsters. I remember being 11 when Chloe got a puppy after crying for 3 days straight because our neighbor had one. I had asked for art lessons that same year and was told, "We'll see." Spoiler alert, we never saw. I babysat Chloe while Dad went golfing. I packed her lunches, combed her hair, told her bedtime stories when she got scared of the dark, which was often, since Chloe was scared of everything: thunderstorms, bugs, loud noises, silence. And every time she clung to my dad or whimpered or put on that helpless little girl act, he'd pull her in and say things like, "That's my delicate girl." Meanwhile, I'd be sitting across the room with a scraped knee or a B+ math test, and the only words I got were, "You've got to be tougher, Angie." I thought maybe things would shift when we got older, that adulthood would level the playing field, but Chloe learned how to keep her crown polished. She stayed fragile just long enough to meet men who liked broken things they could fix. And when those men got tired or left or turned cold, Dad would swoop in like she was made of glass, like she hadn't broken anything herself. She got her first car at 16, brand new, shiny red, with a giant bow on top like something out of a commercial. I got a used Honda at 18 with a dent in the back and a "don't crash it" speech longer than the ride home. And then our mother died, and everything that was unfair before became unbearable. Chloe was 24 and living with her second fiancé at the time, a failed photographer who talked a lot about creative energy but couldn't hold a job to save his life. I was already a mom, trying to keep Danny fed and housed after my ex ran off with a Pilates instructor and half our bank account. When the hospital called, I was the one who got in the car, the one who stood by Mom's bed and held her hand, who signed the paperwork and scheduled the cremation and called the relatives who hadn't spoken to us in years. Chloe? She sent flowers. Said hospitals gave her panic attacks. Dad, of course, said not to push her too hard. You know she's sensitive. When Mom was gone, I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be different. That losing the one person who actually tried to keep things balanced might open my dad's eyes. But grief did what it always does in our family. It made the silence louder and the roles deeper. Chloe started talking about how, one day, she'd have a beautiful wedding to make up for all the pain. Dad clung to that like a life raft, like her fantasy of a perfect day could somehow cancel out death and the fact that our family was mostly held together by duct tape and habit. Fast forward to 6 months ago, Danny's spine starts curving more than it should, and I'm sitting in a doctor's office being told about rods, screws, and time-sensitive procedures. Insurance won't cover it all. I do what I swore I'd never do. I call my father. I remember the silence after I asked, like he was measuring the weight of his wallet against the worth of my child. He didn't say no right away. He said, "Let me take a look at some things." But then came the email, not even a phone call, saying things were tight right now and he'd just made some investments, but he'd be happy to send a card for Danny's birthday. I sat on my bed, holding that phone, reading those words over and over, thinking maybe I misunderstood them. But I didn't. I never do. And that's the thing about Chloe, she doesn't have to ask. She just dreams out loud, and the world rearranges itself to make sure she gets what she wants. That $40,000 check wasn't just money, it was confirmation that the rules I'd lived by my entire life still applied. Chloe gets magic. I get math. So when I watched her squeal at that miracle envelope, when I saw her jump up and wrap her arms around Dad like she'd just been named Queen of the Universe, I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I didn't throw a fit or tell her she was ungrateful. I just smiled. Because I already knew what I was going to do. There's a special kind of silence that lives just beneath the surface of a holiday gathering, the kind that waits behind every laugh, every compliment, every clink of a champagne flute, and if you press the right nerve, it crashes down like a goddamn avalanche. That moment came right after the mimosas were topped off and someone suggested we all move into the living room for coffee and dessert. But I didn't move. I stayed in my chair, calm, legs crossed, napkins still folded in my lap like I was waiting for a second course that would never come. My father was laughing about something Josh had said, probably something bland and corporate, the kind of safe joke that plays well at country clubs and board meetings. And Chloe was wiping away the last of her joyful tears with the back of her perfectly manicured hand. I looked at Danny, who was quietly placing his fork across his plate with the precision of a boy who'd learned how to disappear inside a room full of adults that don't really see him. I reached into my bag, slow and deliberate, and pulled out the envelope, white, unmarked, and heavier than it looked. I didn't stand up like my father did when he made his toast. I didn't raise a glass or clear my throat. I just pushed the envelope across the table toward him and said, "This is for you." My voice was even. I didn't blink. He looked at it like I'd handed him a subpoena, like the paper itself was something dangerous. Chloe paused mid-sentence, eyes bouncing between us, her smile slipping just a little. Josh shifted uncomfortably beside her, probably wondering if he should smile or shut up. My father opened the envelope slowly, like the glue might explode. He pulled out the single sheet of paper inside and read the line I'd written the night before, not typed, not printed, but handwritten in ink that had barely dried before I folded it. "You said you couldn't help save your grandson's spine, but could buy a flower wall and mimosa fountain." He read it once. His lips moved slightly. Then he read it again, slower this time, like the words might change if he gave them a second chance to behave. The room froze. Chloe's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. My Aunt Linda glanced between us like she was watching a tennis match in hell. Even Danny sat straighter, watching his grandfather's hands, which now held the note like it might start to burn. My father didn't say a word. He didn't argue, didn't apologize, didn't defend himself with one of those vague, businesslike excuses he always kept handy. He didn't even crumple the paper. He just folded it carefully, pressed the crease, and set it down beside his untouched pie. Then he picked up his fork and started eating again. And that's when I really knew, that silence wasn't always the absence of words. Sometimes, silence is a weapon. Sometimes, silence is guilt wearing a tuxedo and pretending it's too dignified to bleed. I stood up, still calm, still quiet. I reached over and cleared Danny's plate, stacking it gently on top of mine. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't stutter. I took my coat from the back of my chair and helped Danny into his hoodie. "Merry Christmas," I said, and I smiled, not a forced one, not a bitter one, but the kind of smile you give a person when you finally stop expecting them to be someone they never were. No one said a word. Not Chloe. Not Josh. Not Aunt Linda. And definitely not my father. As I opened the door, the cold air rushed in like it had been waiting for us, like the house itself was exhaling. Danny walked out first, quiet and thoughtful, and I followed, letting the door close gently behind us. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. We got into the car, and I started the engine. Danny stared out the window for a moment before saying, "He read it, didn't he?" I nodded, eyes on the road. "Good," he said. "Just that. Nothing more." And yeah, by the way, that $40,000 check? It covered Chloe's wedding venue, the band, and a honeymoon to Spain. But I guess 10% of that is just $2,000, right? Give or take. I mean, I'm not great at math, but it's something like that. I didn't know if he was ashamed or angry. I didn't know if that silence was a confession or a dismissal or just another way to dodge responsibility. But I knew he'd heard me, loud and clear. The text came in later that evening, just after Danny had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket with his socks half off and a bowl of popcorn sitting untouched beside him. I was sitting on the floor, back against the side of the couch, lights off, TV buzzing softly with some rerun I wasn't watching. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, and I picked it up expecting maybe some belated Merry Christmas from a coworker or one of those auto-generated season's greetings emails that look nice and mean nothing. But it was from Chloe. Just one line. No greeting, no explanation. "You didn't have to ruin brunch." I stared at it for longer than I should have, holding my thumb over the screen like maybe a good response would magically appear if I just waited long enough. But nothing came. Nothing worth sending, anyway. I wasn't about to play that game, the one where she cries foul after years of silent fouls and invisible bruises I'd collected like inheritance. I locked the screen, tossed the phone onto the table, and leaned my head back against the couch until I could feel the tension pulsing behind my eyes like a second heartbeat. Later that night, after I finally made myself get up and turn off the lights and haul my half-asleep son to bed, I went to the bathroom, shut the door, and let it out. Quiet crying, the kind that doesn't echo but swells up in your throat until your own breath feels like betrayal. I didn't want to wake him. I didn't want to explain, again, why his grandfather would drop $40,000 on an ice sculpture and matching gold-trimmed menus, but wouldn't spend a cent to help straighten his grandson's spine before the bones fused in all the wrong ways. But he heard me anyway. I didn't even know he was standing there until I opened the door and found him in the hallway, barefoot, hair a mess, eyes half-lidded but aware. "It's okay, Mom," he said, like he'd rehearsed it. "Grandpa doesn't like me anyway." And that right there? That gutted me harder than anything my father had ever said or failed to say. Because Danny hadn't said it with bitterness or sarcasm or even anger, he said it like it was just a fact, like he was naming a color or the weather or what kind of cereal was in the cabinet. I dropped to my knees, wrapped my arms around him, and held him so tight he groaned a little, but he didn't pull away. He just stood there, hugging me back, like he was the adult now and I was the one who needed reassuring. I thought about everything I'd done since Danny was born, all the nights I worked late shifts, all the lunchboxes I packed at 5 in the morning, all the times I told him we're okay. Even when the car needed new brakes and the rent went up and my hands were cracked from washing dishes at the diner after my office job. I never took a dime of child support after the first check bounced and his dad vanished into the same thin air he'd always promised he'd never disappear into. I never asked my father for anything, not for babysitting, not for school supplies, not even when Danny broke his arm at 7 and I had to put the ER visit on a high-interest card that took me 11 months to pay off. I never asked because I already knew the answer before I opened my mouth. But then came the spine thing, and it wasn't about pride anymore. It was about his future, his health, his damn ability to walk straight and sleep through the night without aching. So I asked, just once. And he said no. Not because he didn't have it, not because he was in debt or going broke, but because Chloe's wedding was coming and there wasn't room in his heart or his wallet for both of us. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was the message underneath it, the one written between the lines of his silence. Your son's pain is not my priority. That night, after Danny finally drifted back to sleep, I went up to the attic. I hadn't been up there in years, not since we moved in, not since I'd stored everything that hurt too much to keep close. I dug through old boxes, ignoring the dust and the creaking floorboards, until I found the photo albums, thick leather ones with our family names stamped on the cover in fading gold letters. I carried them downstairs like they were full of explosives and laid them out across the kitchen table. One by one, I flipped through the pages, searching with precision. Every picture of my father holding Danny, at the hospital after he was born, on his first birthday, at the zoo, at Thanksgiving, I tore each one out with slow, even hands. No tears. No second thoughts. Just quiet, methodical removal. Like surgery, the stack of photos grew beside me, face down. I didn't throw them away. Not yet. I didn't burn them or shred them or stuff them in the trash. I just removed them from the narrative. Like editing out a lie. Because sometimes blood isn't thicker. Sometimes, blood thins out over time until it's just water with a memory. The thing about silence is that it doesn't just fill a room, it lingers like smoke, seeps into the corners of your mind, and settles in places you didn't even know could ache. It had been almost 4 weeks since Christmas brunch, and I hadn't heard a single word from anyone on that side of the family. No calls, no texts, not even one of those generic, forwarded holiday memes people send when they want to pretend they still care. Just absence, like they'd all agreed on some silent pact to pretend I didn't exist. And I'll admit, for the first few days, I kept checking my phone like some teenager waiting for a crush to reply, like maybe my dad was just taking his time to figure out what to say. But nothing came. Not even a typo. Chloe, of course, was alive and well on Instagram. Her feed became a highlight reel of glitter and curated perfection, brunches with the girls, shots of floral arrangements, countdowns in cursive fonts with captions like 1 month to forever and can't wait to marry my best friend. It wasn't even that I cared about the damn wedding. It was the casual way she acted like nothing had happened, like I hadn't lit a fuse under the foundation of our family while she skipped off to plan the cake tasting. I didn't block her. That would have been too easy. I watched, like someone staring at a house on fire from behind glass, not out of jealousy or spite, but because I needed to remind myself who she really was when all the filters came off. Danny never brought up Christmas after that night. He carried the memory like he carried everything else, silently, with that strange teenage resilience that looks like strength but is really just a scar forming too early. He still asked about homework, still made bad microwave burritos, still laughed at videos on his phone when he thought I wasn't listening. But I saw it, the way he flinched slightly at the word grandpa, the way he avoided the topic of the upcoming surgery like it might summon another wave of rejection. I didn't push. I just scheduled the consult, set up the payment plan, and kept showing up. Because that's what we do. We show up, even when the people we once counted on vanish. Then came a Tuesday. Just a regular, off-brand kind of Tuesday. Rainy, quiet, middle of nowhere on the calendar. I was at the kitchen counter paying bills, stacking envelopes like sandbags against another month of barely scraping by, when I paused. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was closure, maybe it was one last jab, or maybe it was something deeper than that, something I couldn't name without breaking. I took out a plain wedding card I'd bought from the dollar store months earlier. It had 2 white doves and a silver ribbon on the front, like something plucked from the safe section of someone else's life. Inside, I wrote one sentence. No greeting. No name. Just ink and silence. Your daughter got her fairy tale. I hope the groom's spine never needs saving. I didn't sign it. I didn't include a return address. I sealed the envelope, stamped it, and dropped it into the mailbox like I was releasing something that had been clawing inside me for years. And then I went back to making dinner. Weeks passed. Then months. The wedding happened sometime in spring. I saw glimpses of it through Chloe's posts and the occasional tagged photo that popped up like a ghost in my feed. She looked exactly how I imagined she would. Perfect skin, perfect dress, perfect teeth flashing under a perfect floral arch. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad. I just felt distance, like we were strangers now, two people who'd once shared a house, but spoke different languages. Then, one morning in late May, I got a message. Not a call. Not a paragraph. Just a photo. It came from Chloe, of all people. No caption. No explanation. Just a family photo from the wedding, sent through a messaging app we hadn't used since Mom's funeral. The image loaded slowly, like even my phone was reluctant to show me. Chloe was in the center, beaming in her lace dress, bouquet clutched like a trophy. Josh stood beside her in a tux that probably cost more than my car's down payment. On either side stood bridesmaids and groomsmen, posed like catalog models. But something was off. Something was missing. I zoomed in. My father wasn't in the picture. Not beside Chloe. Not tucked in the back. Not even cropped halfway like someone who'd arrived late. He wasn't there. I stared at the photo, heart steady, breathing calm. I didn't know if he'd skipped the ceremony or just the photo. I didn't know if he stayed seated or if he was quietly asked to step out. Maybe he left early. Maybe he'd read the card, the one I sent without a name, and something in him finally cracked. He didn't say a word that day. But silence is a language. And sometimes, silence is the only apology you get. I didn't respond. I didn't ask questions. I didn't send anything back. I just looked at the photo one more time, saved it to a folder I didn't name, and closed the app. I don't know if he regrets it, but I hope every time he sees their wedding photo, he remembers the envelope I gave him.